Do you want really productive raised beds that are going to give you great crops year after year? Well, on today's episode of Niall Gardens, I'm going to show you how to prepare your raised beds for winter in just 3 quick and easy steps to give you exactly that. Hey everyone, how's it going? And welcome back. Preparing your vegetable beds for winter really is surprisingly simple. It doesn't take as long as you'd think, and it is just so worthwhile. By using no-dig principles, it's easy to not only keep your soil in great condition, but effectively build great soil over time. And here's how. This bed has been really productive all year, but it's time to get working on it. And step 1 is weed removal. I really do think that it's worth taking just even a little bit of time at this stage to remove as many weeds as you can from your beds. Although what we're going to be doing shortly will certainly help suppress weeds through lack of light, perennial weeds are really, well, annoyingly resilient. So getting rid of them now is a great thing to do. Look at it as an investment. For beds that aren't particularly choked with weeds, like this, I tend to go over them with a little hand hoe or my hori, either simply scraping them from the surface or gently lifting them away, or in the case of really tough perennial weeds, really making sure to get underneath them and lift as much of the root as well as the weed plant itself. Then, when you've got a really nice, clean, tidy, weed-free bed, then it's on to step number 2. Step 2 is all about mulching. Now, opinions vary on what thickness of mulch you should go for, but as a very rough guide, aim for not going with less than maybe 2 to 5 centimeters or 1 to 2 inches. You pretty much can't go wrong if you go with that. And if you're in doubt, mulch deeper rather than skimping on quantity and going too thin. Your soil is never going to complain at being given too much compost, and a really nice thick layer of mulch is going to block light and help suppress weeds. Really, when it comes to gardening, mulching is just such a valuable thing to do. I always think of the soil and our beds as being like a battery. Productive growing spaces are just great, but stop and consider quite how much energy and nutrition flows in one direction, outwards. Organic mulches help to replace and return the nutrients back into the soil where your plants need them. And it's not only the nutrition of the soil that gets a boost, so does the soil structure itself. You know, if you have a container or a pot with compost in it, and over time the compost seems to shrink, that's not because it's getting washed away or getting sucked up by the plants. That's because it's continually breaking down more and more. As this happens, the organic matter particles get smaller and smaller, and of course, so do the air gaps. Overall, the structure degrades, and it's exactly the same for your beds. Nice, fresh organic matter added to the top of your beds will get drawn down through the soil over time, helping to maintain that ideal structure. Mulching quite simply helps to suppress weeds, particularly if you live in a mild climate like I do. Weeds, and particularly perennial weeds, are going to keep growing through the winter, and who wants to have to do this job, starting into clearing weeds, come spring, when all really any of us want to do is get stuck into nice sowing and planting. When it comes to choice of mulch, well, you actually have a lot of choice. Any good organic matter mulch is going to do brilliantly, whether that's compost, leaf mold, animal manures, straw, used duck bedding, you name it. Now, for this bed, I've chosen to go with not 1, but 2 things. The first is this, which is really well-rotted farmyard manure. And on top of that, I'm also going to add an additional layer of compost. Now, you don't have to do this. The reason that I am is that I've expected quite a lot out of the raised beds here in my vegetable garden over the last year or so. Last year, I didn't mulch them during the winter, and I've been growing things in them since then. So I think they deserve that real extra hit of nutrition and an extra little bit of TLC. Whatever mulch you decide to go for, spread it out nice and evenly, give it a rake, and just spread it out over the top of your soil. And once you've got that done, that's step 2 done and dusted, and then it's on to step 3. The bed's been weeded, the mulch has been put down, and now step 3 is to simply cover your bed. Now, this assumes that you're putting your bed to sleep for the winter months, and unless you're specifically growing winter crops, I would strongly recommend covering your beds, and there are a few good reasons for this. Although a mulch can do a great job of minimising weed growth, it's still a growing layer in itself, which can of course support weeds over time, especially if weed seeds get blown or dropped onto it. Here is, well, what could be described as a not so great corner of a bed that, although it's been cared for, it's been left untouched, and you can see quite how quickly weeds will establish themselves in the soil. However, a layer of plastic, cardboard or something similar won't act as a growing medium, and it's the most efficient way to suppress weeds and stop any new ones taking hold. At the most basic level, covering your soil helps to reduce weathering. Heavy winds, rains, long cold spells, unexpected dry spells during the winter will weather down your soil. If you've put all of the effort into getting the surface so nice now, it's totally worth protecting it until you're ready to start growing in it in the spring. Finally, if you choose a covering that's black or at least dark in colour, it's going to absorb the heat of the sun, warming the soil that little bit earlier for you in spring. You can cover your beds with almost anything you'd like, whether it's landscape fabric, cardboard, or some people even use old carpets. But my recommendation is this. This is Corex. If you're not familiar with it, it's a finely corrugated plastic sheet that actually gets used for all sorts of things, all the way from construction to crafting. But these large sheets are sold in builders' merchants as temporary floor covering. Yes, it is plastic, but the reason that I really like Corex is that it can be reused year after year. And although it's plastic, it's not like a landscape fabric that can really easily fray into tiny shreds of plastic that just get everywhere, and particularly into your soil. Because it's corrugated, you don't even have to cut it to size. You can simply fold it, and it'll fold with a really nice square edge. Also, in my experience, once you've weighed it down, it stays put, it doesn't get blown around, and finally, because it's black, it's going to absorb the heat of the sun. Oh yeah, and it's affordable too. Each of these huge pieces I have, which are about, well, 8 foot by 4 foot each, cost me less than €5. Lay your covering on top of your nicely weeded, beautifully mulched beds. Then all you have to do after that is weigh it down, just like this. I use old roof tiles so that it's not going to get lifted during the winter storms, and that is it. Truly, the job is done, and you can just leave your beds to sit happily during the winter months, knowing that they're going to be ready for you come spring. That job was easy, but I now have to repeat that for at least, I'm looking around, at least another 8 raised beds, so I better get stuck in. And while I'm doing that, why don't you watch this? Another great video packed with useful information and inspiration for exactly this time of year. And until next time, see you later.